to record the... Okay. So yeah, so much content to go through. I might whiz through some of it, but what I'll say is the recording will be there, and I also intend to make a little bit of a longer recording sometime over the next few days, just so that we don't miss any content out, but people can go back to that again. So really, the focus of this first talk is to talk about risk factors and the kind of things that we should be aware of. You know, in particular, we're interested in things like modifiable risk factors. What are the things that you can actually alter that's going to make a difference to brain function in the long run? But I'd like to just start by introducing myself. Charmaine Shepherd. I'm a fully certified functional medicine practitioner. I've been in practice for just over 20 years now. And I run my own private practice, but also I also, together with Jean and Joe, we run a cognitive clinic where we have a very strong functional medicine focus on identifying personalized causes for cognitive decline. We find solutions for people. So I'm really passionate about teaching as well. I also am the host of a podcast called The Science of Turning Back Time, which is all about how we can reverse biological aging in our body. But really, the story for me started back in 2016 when I was at a conference and I heard about a neurologist called Dr. Dale Bredesen in the USA who had run a very small trial only on 9 people, but where they were able to turn around some stages of dementia, and they were able to get a reversal. And this was the first time ever in my history of practicing where there had ever been any kind of solution. Up until that point, it was just like, well, too bad. You've got dementia. It's a one-way road, and you know, so sad. Nothing we can do about it. So I really took note because I've got a lot of dementia and Alzheimer's in my family history, and I also I've done the genetic testing. I've got a copy of the gene myself. So it was the first time where there was something that could be done. So I went over to California, did the training, came back, and on just a day after I came back, I had this wonderful gentleman and his wife walk in, and he had quite advanced dementia. And I said, look, I have no idea whether this works at all, but let's give it a go because we've got nothing to lose. And I recruited Jean in as well. I was like, Jean, you need to help me here. This is so complicated. And what happened in that first, which we will call him case 0, really turned our worlds around. We saw someone who had very, very significant memory loss, you know, begin to turn that around. And we watched how that impacted the entire family, you know, getting their dad back, getting a husband back again. And out of that, cognition was born. We realized at that point we had to do more work around that. So we started working then more with families with dementia and cognitive decline. But I would say in the last 3 to 4 years, we've been saying, you know, we really need to work with this a lot earlier. We need to work with prevention. And so our focus has been moving a lot more to prevention. We do still work with families with dementia, but we really want to focus on, you know, trying to prevent this from happening in the first place. This is our team. It's myself, Jean, who's also a functional medicine practitioner and a herbalist, medical herbalist. Jackie, who's not with us on this course, but she'll be on the next one, who's a nutritional therapist. And then Joanna, who's also a functional medicine certified coach and a nutritional therapist, amongst doing a whole lot of other things as well. She's does a huge amount of work around vagus nerve function and cognitive health as well. So we're really excited to be bringing this program to you. But dementia, unfortunately, is a public health emergency, and women are at the epicenter of this. We can see this. It looks like, am I right, Joe, that we're all women on this call? I don't think we have any men that have signed up for this. But women are at the epicenter of it in terms of who's affected and in terms of who ends up doing a lot of the caring as well. And the impact, just as some of you have touched on at the start of this call, is huge. It's huge on families, it's huge on the economy, and it's huge for the individual themselves, when they are also impacted. And dementia is rising fast. So at the moment, it's the #1 cause of death for women in the UK. And 1 in 3 people born today will develop dementia. So just take a moment for those stats to set in, because they are really very significant. If you go on to, some of the sites like the NHS, they'll say up to 50% of dementia can be prevented, but we actually know it's a lot higher than that, because we look at the risk factors that they use, but there are emerging risk factors and data that's coming out that is definitely putting that number a lot higher, which means a large number of cases could be prevented. So this is University College of London. This was July last year. This big study came out, the Lancet Commission on Dementia Prevention. And they were saying nearly half of dementia cases could be prevented by tackling 14 risk factors. So let's have a look at what those risk factors are. High LDL cholesterol, one type of cholesterol, physical activity, depression, diabetes. There's a whole list here of things that they felt were risk factors that could lead to the development of dementia, and that were modifiable, things that could be changeable. Again, Alzheimer's Society saying, there's a lot of evidence that the things you can do could impact on the development of Alzheimer's, especially, they say, if you've got that window between the age of 40 to 65 is a really critical time. Now, that's because dementia, by the time symptoms develop, that process has been going on under the surface for about 20 years. We know that now, which means that what you're doing in your 40s, your 50s, and your 60s could potentially have a big impact later on. That doesn't mean that it's too late to start. If you're in your 70s or 80s, you can start at any point to reverse these factors. But what it does mean is that we want to try and catch people younger and younger and younger. And Jean and I speak about this quite a lot, is that we really want to be catching people in their 40s and their 50s to say the things that you do now really do matter and can make a big difference. Again, from the NHS as well, there's good evidence that healthy lifestyle can reduce your risk of developing dementia when you're older. So they're all in agreement. We all know that there are definitely a lot of factors that we can be preventing. These are the key ones here. And, we spoke a little bit, I think Jill was talking about genetics as well. Genetics is a big factor. We'll look at that as well. But these are the classical genes that are connected to the development of cognitive decline. I'm going to use cognitive decline because there are, different patterns of dementia and Alzheimer's. But these are certainly the genes connected to cognitive decline. Certain medications, which we'll go through, have been linked. Metabolic health, like Mary said, looking at blood glucose is a big one. Inflammation, mental health, we now know, also add some very specific risk factors as well. Physical activity and sleep, nutrition and gut health, and hormones. So we're going to try over the next six weeks to really tackle as many of these topics as we can. and just give you kind of practical strategies to to see how you can reduce risk in these areas. So here's a question, and I'll get you guys to just pop this into the chat for me. And I'll ask Joe to call it out because I can't see the chat when I'm presenting. What is the #1 risk factor for developing dementia? Do you guys want to just pop that into the chat? Let me know what your thoughts are.
Oh, we've got first answer. Food we eat from June, insulin resistance, poor diet, age, gut health, food inflammation, lack of physical exercise, diet, genetics, aluminium in cookware,
Good. Okay.
unhealthy lifestyle.
Yeah. So those are all correct. Those are all big risk factors for developing dementia. But the #1 risk factor for developing dementia, who said age?
Age, that was Fiona.
Okay, so Fiona, you are our winner. So age is the #1 risk factor for developing dementia. And this is interesting. So for a long time, we felt, well, age, there's nothing we can do about it, right? I mean, you have no choice. You get older every year. So there's no point in even, considering this risk factor. But more and more, it's becoming really interesting to look at aging as being the #1 risk factor, knowing that we all age very, very differently. And so you may be aware of this. You could see someone who's 91, like Jean's father, who's still learning a new musical instrument, fit, healthy. And then you can have somebody who's 70, who's actually, seems a lot older in themselves. So there's a difference between chronological age and biological age. So your chronological age is every year you have a birthday, your
Internet. Oh, she's back.
Am I back?
Yes.
Okay, sorry. I don't know where you guys lost me and how much you heard.
You only lost about last 10 seconds, Charmaine.
Okay, all right. So what I was saying is that there's a big difference between chronological age and biological age.
Charmaine, could you share your screen again? I think it's gone for now. Thank you. Thanks.
Here we go. So your chronological age is every year as you have a birthday, you're 1 year older. Nothing we can do about it. Your biological age, though, can vary. And what the research is showing us now is that people who are aging faster biologically have a higher risk of dementia. So, and this is actually measurable. I do quite a lot of epigenetic testing on people to calculate their biological age, but it is measurable. And the reason why this matters is because it's modifiable. More and more now, we've got such fantastic research out there that shows even things like exercise. You can wipe 9 years off your biological age just with exercise. And so, this is a very, very exciting area to be working in right now because we are really able to measure very, very, very specifically the kind of things that people do and how that impacts on their biological age. So even though age is your biggest risk factor, it's something that is entirely modifiable as well. Now my slides are not moving. There we go. So this is an interesting study from the UK Biobank on chronological versus biological age. 280,000 participants. So we're talking about a really, really massive study. They had blood markers, genetics, epigenetic markers on this group, and they were also measuring biological age. And then they followed these people for 13 years. Unfortunately, during that time, 1,770 of the participants did go on to develop dementia. But what they did find was the faster people aged, the more likely they were to develop dementia. And the really, I think, exciting thing that came out of the study is that a lot of the blood markers here are things that people can manage and change. So you can actually slow down the rate at which you're aging. You can slow down the rate at which your, not just your body ages, but your brain ages as well. Okay, so I'd like you to meet Kara the cave woman. And the reason why I'm going to talk about this is because we have this explosion of dementia happening. It's on the rise, it's increasing. And the question is why? But if we start to look at, go back to what our ancestors were doing and to what we're doing now, it becomes really clear. So Kara, the cave woman, she's active. She eats whole foods because she doesn't have access to unprocessed foods. She's got strong social bonds. That's the only way you can survive when, in those times. She's exposed to natural light, and she has a good deep sleep pattern. And we meet the modern version of Kara. So she's busy, she's stressed. She doesn't have a great amount of time to cook, so she's eating processed foods. Very stressful lifestyle. She's quite sedentary because she's got an office job, so she's sitting at a desk. She's exposed to blue light all the time, some late nights. And interestingly enough, she lives in a city, so even though she's surrounded by a lot of people, she actually feels quite isolated and alone as well. So what we see is a perfect storm for a lot of these risk factors. We now live a lifestyle that leads to more inflammation. We have access to a lot more sugar in our diet, so we, finding a lot more blood sugar dysregulation. Even though we have excess food, we actually have quite a lot of nutrient deficiencies because our soils are depleted. There's a lot of environmental toxins. We're now facing a lot more hormone imbalance than we used to because of endocrine disruptors. And we have modern stress as well. So it's just created this real perfect storm. So a little quiz. Do you guys have pen and paper with you? Grab that if you've got. And keep some score. So here, if you get, if you answer A, you get 0 points. If you answer B, you get 3 points. And if you answer C, you get 5. So I'll just give you a second to write that down. Okay, so question number 1. How many hours of quality sleep do you get per night? Are you getting 7 to 9 and waking up feeling refreshed? You're getting less, 5 to 6, or less than 5 hours or disrupted sleep? Okay, number 2. So in this one, typically we would ask people if they're aware of what their insulin levels are. Very few people are, but many people do know what their HbA1c is if you're getting this tested through your GP. This is your level average blood glucose. So see if you are able to answer this. Some people will know this. Some people might not know. If you have an answer to that, if not, don't worry. And then how often do you move your body? Are you moving it daily, getting a little bit of a sweat or getting your pulse up a couple of times a week, or are you sedentary? And then stress. What's your stress level like? how do you manage it? And the last one, do you have a sense of purpose and social connection? Okay, so add up your numbers. This is not a perfect science. It's just a little quiz, but just an idea of how, you might be matching on your biological or chronological age. And just quickly, were those results what you expected? Are they better? Are they worse? You can drop that into the chat as well if you want. But it's never too late to change course, and it's never too late to really focus on making some changes that will make a difference in the long run to brain health. Okay, so we're going to be focusing on a lot of the risk factors for cognitive decline. Just a few here: nutrition, sleep, oral health, social engagement. Nutrition is a big one, gut health, medication, and genetics. So I'm just going to go through a few of these. So metabolic and cardiovascular risk factors, as I think Mary said earlier on, there's a very big connection between blood glucose, insulin, and brain health as well. So dementia has been in some circles been called diabetes type 3 because the brain is extremely sensitive to glucose changes and to insulin changes as well. We're going to be having a whole talk about that next week. But it is a big factor that we have to look at. High blood pressure is definitely one of the risk factors as well. And then what we call dyslipidemia, this is having an imbalance in your cholesterol. So it's not necessarily high cholesterol. Having high cholesterol in and of itself is not an issue. It's when the imbalance happens between the types of cholesterol. Obesity, here we talk about visceral fat. This is actually the fat that surrounds organs. And then something called high homocysteine. This is a little protein that builds up inside the blood and is actually really easy to resolve if you've got enough of the right nutrients, especially vitamin B12 and folate. Or things like hardening of the arteries and the arteries getting, aging and getting a little inflamed and harder as well. Issues with circulation, and then issues with liver as well. So those are kind of some of the key factors as well. So many of you will not have necessarily have access to all of the more sophisticated laboratory data. We'll talk about that later on, blood tests. But what most people and everyone will have access to through your GP is to do a very simple test called triglyceride glucose index. It's just to work out the ratio between triglycerides and glucose. So even if you don't have a budget to do more testing, or your GP is not able to do more testing, just these two little markers, and they're so cheap to run on the NHS, can be really quite useful to look at risk, and is sorry guys. So I don't know why the internet keeps crashing on me. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. So yeah, this is a really very cheap, very simple test to that you can easily get through your GP. Okay. How many of you track anything like blood sugar, blood pressure, homocysteine, or cholesterol? Pop that in the chat if you are tracking or you're not tracking, or if you're tracking some of it but not the others. So just to get an idea of what people are tracking at the moment.
Are you back, Charmaine?
I've just moved the router. I don't know if it's the problem with my router or...
Mm-hmm.
Okay, what are we getting? Are people tracking anything or...
Blood pressure monthly and glucose annually. That's from first answer.
Good, good.
Some people are saying, I don't track, none. I'm careful with blood sugar, but don't track numbers.
Good.
Blood pressure, cholesterol.
Yeah. So what I normally would say to people is kind of get a baseline of where you're at, and you can get a good idea if any of these things are an issue for you, and if they are, it's something you can regularly track. So, you know, it might be that you have you know, an issue with blood sugar, then it is something you want to keep an eye on. So these things, they're important to check. They are important to sort of know what your baseline is, and then if there is an issue, tracking that is really important, and making sure that you're able to get those numbers into a good level. Okay, chronic inflammation, oxidative stress. This is a really, really big one, where the body is under a constant level of inflammation, which can cause some damage to brain cells and to the blood vessels as well. This can happen with a high toxic burden, you know, things like heavy metals, or like Talitha said, mold can create problems here as well, pesticides. So we actually had a really interesting case a few years ago of a young male who came in his early 50s saying, you know, I'm having to give up work because I just cannot work anymore. My brain is just gone. And he was in a, you know, a position where he felt he couldn't continue working. So we ran all the tests for him, and he was a Formula One engineer. So we ran the test, and actually, not surprising, we found a high level of something called MTBE, which is an additive for fuel, and that's used in the Formula One cars. So he had an extremely high level of this. So we worked with him to bring those levels down. And I'm very glad to say that we haven't seen him for a while now, because he's doing good, but he's working as a consultant. But yeah, so, you know, those are obviously very much linked to professions, you know. So if people are in a profession where they are exposed to certain things, or they have hobbies, you know, that expose them to lead paints or anything like that, we often see this kind of thing. But we do also see it in people who don't have any strange hobbies or work in any kind of specific industry. So in some people, you know, if they just don't have the genetic capacity to detoxify well, their systems can also become overwhelmed. So generally, what we say to people is to just be aware of what's happening with you, you know, sorry, happening in your environment. And whether you may be exposed to things that could be harming you without you even knowing. And then genetics. So this is a really big one. I think, Jill, you mentioned this as well. A lot of you at the start of the call spoke about family members. And so there is quite a big genetic link as well. Specifically, when we talk about Alzheimer's, there's the APOE4 genes, but there are other genes like the MTHFR, COMT2, which are involved in the development of dementia. and then also what we call epigenetic aging. So genetics are important because we often run genetic testing for a lot of our patients. Are important because if you know that you've got certain genes, it can help you to focus on specific things that you need to do. For example, the COMT gene there, I know I've got an issue with that, which makes me a lot more susceptible to stress. So it means that I need to manage my stress a little bit better. I need to, take a little extra magnesium because this gene needs extra magnesium to function well. And so, knowing the stuff can be quite helpful as well. What we say around genes are that they give you a predisposition, but it doesn't mean that you will ever go on to develop, the conditions that these genes predispose you to. And that's because we have something called epigenetics. What that means is our genes get switched on and switched off depending on certain environmental conditions. And so you may well have the genes that predispose you to Alzheimer's, like I do, the APOE4. But as long as you, keep the environment in which those genes soak, really, really healthy, your chances of developing it is significantly reduced. So genes respond to our environment, whether they're going to switch on or switch off. And so that becomes really important to know, even if you do have, a genetic link there, you absolutely can do a lot to overcome that. Any of you here done any kind of genetic testing?
No.
No. No. Okay, good.
I think Josh, she did one 23 years ago.
Who? Jill.
Josepha, Josh.
Oh, Josepha.
Mm-hmm.
Oh yeah, it was the 23andMe, the company that's just gone bust.
Yes, sorry, yes. I thought it was 23 years ago.
23andMe, yeah. Okay, so you can get quite a lot of that information from that data, and get a good idea of areas where you need to put your attention and focus. Okay, so as I said, genes do matter because the genetic information can help us personalize the strategy a little bit more, but they are not your destiny. And we do know now that even if you do have those risks, genetic risks, there's tons you can do to overcome them. So when we asked about risks earlier on, a few of you mentioned nutrition and nutritional deficiencies. So we are obviously going to speak about a lot more about this in great detail. But certainly if the brain doesn't have what it needs, the core nutrients to function, it is definitely going to be struggling to perform in the way that it needs to. So just very quickly, these are the key nutrients for the brain to work. So in order for the for the brain to build and protect the brain cells, it needs DHA, choline, B12, folate, zinc, iron, and vitamin D. For the cells to communicate with each other, it needs tyrosine, tryptophan, vitamin B6, SAMe, vitamin C, magnesium. I'm going through these quite quick because we are going to do a lot of work around this. It's just to give you an idea of how nutrient heavy the brain is. Our brains are processing so much information all the time, and it needs a huge amount of fuel. For the brain circulation to flow and blood to be able to get to where it needs and deliver oxygen, we need L-arginine, EPA, DHA, iron, polyphenols, coenzyme Q10. And then to power the brain, so kind of the little batteries that are going to power it and get it, really the energy that it needs. We need acetyl L-carnitine, B2, B3, ALA, creatinine, coenzyme Q10, and so on and so on. So, we're not going to go into this in too much detail because we have a whole lecture on this. But what it does mean is that if you're on a diet that's quite depleted and you're not getting these nutrients in, the brain doesn't have what it needs to function. So, you know, getting the right foods and the right nutrients in can be very, very helpful as well. And then toxin exposure. So, you know, obviously the ones that cause the most significant problems are your heavy metals, lead, mercury, and aluminium. And even though lead pipes were removed from homes decades ago, we still see in some cases issues around some people and lead. Mercury and aluminium can be a problem as well. And then, like Talitha said, mycotoxins from mold can be a problem for the brain as well. But these days we also face a lot of pollution that is quite difficult to avoid. Plastics, BPA, phthalates, and air pollution. I think we're quite lucky in Scotland with air pollution. You know, we don't seem to have too much of an issue with that. But plastics, you know, thinking about things like perhaps microwaving food in plastics, heating it up, or a water bottle that's made out of plastic. A lot of these plastics can leach into the system and cause problems. And actually, there was recently a study showing that, and from autopsy results, where they were finding almost a sandwich bag full of plastic in the brains of, you know, a lot of the cases that they looked at. So we definitely need to be very mindful of plastics in our environment, and especially heating things up in it, or, you know, having, you know, things like plastic water bottles. And then we're going to be talking quite a lot about the gut and the brain. So we have one whole lecture on this as well. So absolutely critical, because a lot of the neurotransmitters, that's the little chemicals that help our brains fire and work really well, are actually produced in the gut, nearly 80% of them, and they're not transported up to the brain. So a lot of our neurotransmitters are produced there. And so it becomes really, really, really important that we take note of what's happening in the gut. There's such a strong gut-brain connection. So a question for you guys: have you ever noticed brain fog after eating certain foods, or just generally after meals, like an afternoon slump or anything like that? Curious whether you notice that connection.
June is saying chocolate. If I overeat sweet things.
Sugar.
After aubergine.
Aubergine.
Yes.
That's interesting.
Yes, sugar, too much sugar, carb heavy food at lunchtime. Joseph, I think all food.
Yeah, it is interesting. We go to a lot of functional medicine events, and they're very nutritionally driven. So the kind of lunches that we're given at these conferences and is very different from what you would normally get. So I recently I was doing some ultrasound training in Manchester with a group of, it was primarily doctors, and they served us sandwiches for lunch, and then they served like biscuits and things for tea at tea time. And like after lunch, you could see everybody was slumping like this. And you know, people were like, oh, I can't think. And they were running to the coffee and trying to get more coffee. And I thought, this is absolutely crazy, you know, that these are the foods that do the most harm to the brain. So when you're trying to study and learn, it's not great. So we're actually, we forget, because we attend all these functional medicine conferences where you have superfoods normally for lunch and for snacks, and you go back to the afternoon session and you feel really switched on. You could see the difference in just these kind of two groups and what they were eating lunchtime. Okay, so sleep and circadian rhythms. This is a really, really big one. Jean's going to be talking about this in week something, I don't know, week 4 or 5. But really talking about the importance of sleep. And here, you know, things that are big risk factors are, you know, things like sleep apnea or insomnia, even shift work and blue light exposure. So again, you know, if you are struggling with sleep, this is going to be a really important lecture for you to be focusing on. Here's our cave woman, Cara, again, sleeping next to the fire. There's no artificial light. Interesting thing about stress, I think, for our ancestors is that stress probably would have been quite immediate, you know. But at the end of the day, there's no artificial light. So in the evenings, I guess there wasn't a great deal to do but to get into a good deep sleep. Whereas our modern Cara has got a lot of stress. You know, she's thinking about her pension. She's thinking about work deadlines. You know, she's got blue light. So yeah, our modern lives generally don't help with sleep. Stress and mental health, we know this is a really, really big area of risk. Chronic stress, high cortisol, depression, anxiety, and then what's called poor vagal tone. Joe, I think you're probably going to be touching on that. And nervous system imbalance. Again, these are very well documented areas of risk as well. So our cave woman, Cara, stress would have been quite immediate. You know, you get chased by some kind of beast. You have to run, you have to fight, you have to survive. But once that stress is over, you know, would have been shaken off. Whereas our modern stress is very different. It's much more chronic, much more ongoing. We're lying thinking about, you know, more, you know, our pension plans and the world, state of the world, and politics. And, you know, I think just generally stress is a lot more chronic these days rather than acute. And that has a very big impact as well. So just very quickly, some studies here. This is a JAMA Neurology 2010, finding that women who reported stress in midlife were more than twice as likely to develop dementia later in life. If this is you, don't worry, you're here. We're going to give you tons of strategies on how to deal with this. I'm always very aware that when we say that stress is a risk factor, you know, that in itself can become stressful if you're already stressed. But yes, we're going to give you lots of strategies on that as well. And another one here, Journal of Neuroscience, is a little older one, but it's showing that high cortisol levels, that's your stress hormones, in older adults being associated with shrinking of the area of the brain that's important for memory. So again, stress is going to be something we'll definitely want to make sure that we focus on. And then physical inactivity. So lack of exercise, low muscle mass, balance and coordination. These are also quite significant risk factors. I actually posted a study today on LinkedIn, a twin study, where they looked at leg strength and the development of dementia and cognitive decline. And they found those, I'll find the study for you and I'll share it. Those who had stronger leg strength had better brain health, bigger, you know, hippocampal areas in the brain as well. So we know that physical activity, and again, this is something Jean will be talking about, increases something called BDNF, brain-derived neurotrophic factor, which actually directly impacts on the size of the brain. If we go back to our cave woman again, she would have had to hunt for her food, right? So there was no sitting around at the office all day behind a desk. She'd be out there foraging, hunting. So a lot of physical activity. And I think today we have a lot more sedentary lifestyles as well. Joe, am I running out of time? I'm going to have to speed up, right? Okay, so exercising throughout life. Again, this is University College London. Great study. Joe's, I think, going to tell me I need to speed up a lot. Hormone imbalance, this is huge, huge, huge. I mean, you know, going through perimenopause, a lot of women will suffer with brain fog. We know that if there's hormonal imbalance and decline in hormones, it's going to be having a massive impact. And that's not just our sex hormones, it's our thyroid hormones as well. So very quick, I'm running out of time. I don't have a huge amount of time on this, but true or false, low estrogen has no effect on memory. False. Men's testosterone levels don't affect their brain health. Who cares? They're not on the call at all. So no, that's terrible. We all still have men in our lives, but actually, men's testosterone levels do affect their brain function, and hormonal imbalances do not just affect women, although women are often more severely affected. And thyroid hormones play a key role in brain energy as well. Medications, so I'm not going to go into this in too much detail, but there are certain medications which are very well documented risks for developing cognitive decline and dementia. The strongest ones are for your anti-cholinergics, so things like amitriptyline, your benzodiazepines, diazepam, lorazepam, zopiclone. These, your long-term use, also have warnings. And then there are warnings around PPIs, and a lot of my patients are on these. And I know, Jean, you've got the same. Omeprazole, lansoprazole, esomeprazole as well. There have been warnings issued on those. Antipsychotics, very rare that we have patients on those, occasionally. And then some antidepressants like amitriptyline and paroxetine. Paroxetine in particular has got a warning as well. So if you are on any of these medications, please do not stop them. You know, what you need to do is obviously you know, work with your doctor to try and find solutions, but we never recommend just stopping any of these. And then again, I'm running out of time, but think about what questions you need to ask your doctor about your medications to make sure that they're not contributing to any risk for you as well. Social and cognitive engagement, this is huge. So much studies out there, so much evidence. People who are isolated, who are, you know, are not getting any intellectual stimulation, lack of ongoing learning, massively impacted as well. And then poor diet and glycemic control. We're going to talk about this next week. But I just wanted to bring this in. They always say don't put too much content on a slide, but this is a really, really important one. We're sitting with a huge amount of ultra-processed foods. And I think sometimes people don't quite realize how much they're eating until we add it up, you know, because even things like yogurts, a lot of our breads, biscuits, crisps, all these things are ultra-processed. And look at this Brazilian study, 10,775 adults followed for 8 years. Participants who consumed more than 20% of their calories from ultra-processed foods had 28% faster cognitive decline. Just take a moment for that to settle in. Participants who consumed more than 20% calories from ultra-processed foods had a 28% faster decline in global cognitive scores. It's not that hard to get to 20% of your daily calories with that. If you start with yogurt, you start with a cereal out of a box or a muesli out of a box. You have a bread that's highly processed for lunch, processed meat, maybe a little bit of ham on there, and then maybe a bag of crisps. You're already quite well over that 20%. UK Biobank study, massive 72,000 participants. Again, higher intake of ultra-processed foods associated with dementia. Framingham, 2,700 middle-aged. people are consuming processed foods correlated with worse performance on memory and executive function. Anyway, it goes on and on and on and on and on and on. Top 6 blood biomarkers that we think are really important for people to test every couple of years to make sure that, you know, if these things are good, you're pretty good. But the full biomarkers that we tend to run in the clinic look something more like this. And this is kind of a big full panel. Again, you'll get copies of all of the slides and things. p-tau217, really exciting development now, is a highly specific biomarker for Alzheimer's disease. So in the past, the only way you could diagnose Alzheimer's was on autopsy. Once somebody's passed away and you did an autopsy, you could check if they had amyloid and tangles and things. And then came along the PET scans, the amyloid PET scans. They're very difficult to come by. They're extremely expensive. So now that we have this blood test, the p-tau217 has been a game changer in diagnosis. So for people who have got early signs or even a very strong family history, monitoring p-tau can be very useful. These are the genetics that are involved, but again, very modifiable. Oral brain connection, talking about the connection between the brain and the mouth. Chronic gum disease is a risk factor because it's linked to increased cognitive decline, partly because we think that there are some bacteria, in particular one called Porphyromonas gingivalis, that have been found in the brains of patients with Alzheimer's. So these bacteria and cytokines can cross the blood-brain barrier, and the mouth is not that far from the brain. So again, it's something we test for in the clinic, but generally I would say oral health, making sure you've got your very regular checkups as well. And I'm almost done. So modern threats, lots of modern threats there, but what I don't want to do is overwhelm you guys, because it probably is sounding pretty overwhelming right now with all these risks, but actually small steps can make a massive difference. And you know, you don't need a time machine to go back to kind of caveman times. Start small, test smartly, and make brain care a ritual. There's a ton of things you can do. And I'm very overrun my time. I apologize for that. I'm going to hand you over to Joe.
That's very, very interesting, Charmaine. Thank you so much. Thank you for introduction as well early on. I just wanted to add to that my role at Cognition for over 3 years was brain scanning, actually, and mapping the brains as well. So I did a fair amount of scans, and also I was working as a neurofeedback therapist, so helping people with cognitive decline with photobiomodulation to stimulate the brain. But if you are interested what actually happens in the brain when people are losing the memories and which parts of the brain are affected, I will be more than happy to share some of the QEEG scans that we did in the past, if you wanted to see what happens in terms of brainwave activity and how brain slows down. And yeah, so this is just a last minute thought that if you're interested, I'm happy to share that with you at some point. So yeah, but now at the moment, my main role with Cognition is functional medicine, health coaching, nutrition, and helping people implementing change. And I had a presentation for tonight, which probably takes about half an hour, but I'm just going to go through the most important slides so we can all get started with implementing change. So I will share my screen with you. Oh, wait for it. And we're going to slightly change the topic. So we're going to talk about psychology of change and also habit formation. So now you may be wondering, why are we talking about habits and psychology of change in a brain health program? And the simple answer is this: we want you to get the most out of this program. and we want you to get all the information and knowledge that is needed, but we also want you to move towards transformation as well. So every week we will introduce some sort of coaching tools and habit formation tools for you so you can start implementing some changes. So when it comes to lifestyle medicine, whether it's eating well, managing stress, moving more, improving sleep, or nurturing your relationships, everything that Charmaine touched on, most of us, we already have a general idea of what we should be doing. However, the challenge isn't usually about the knowledge. The challenge is about bridging the gap between knowing and actually doing. That's not so easy because our brain is not wired for transformation. Our brain is not wired for change. Our brain is wired for survival. So by giving you those tools every week, you will be able to, implement them successfully. So we're going to talk about why change is difficult, how to make change, sustainable changes from your brain and nervous system perspective. And we also will be giving you obviously lots of, ideas about the lifestyle changes. Okay, so just real quick. So stages of change. So the goal of this exercise is to empower you to build sustainable brain healthy habits. And change is something we all want. We want better focus, better memory, more energy. We want improved sleep, less stress. But let's be honest, that's not always so easy. And the most important is not actually a straight line. It's a process that can be quite messy. So by looking at the stages of change, I wanted you to recognize where are you at the moment if it comes to your brain health. Oh, that's the one. So we start with contemplation. So the contemplation is that's where we begin today, basically, is the thinking stage. Is when you may be asking yourself, why am I here? What do I want to change about my brain health? And you're just gathering the kind of awareness and information. Why are you here? So that's week 1. And then from next week, you're going to move into preparation. So we will move into planning. So that's where you start deciding, what can I realistically commit to? What tools do I need? And how can I start implementing as well? So that will start next week. And then week 2 to 6, you're going to be in an action stage and actively working on key areas like your nutrition, your sleep, stress management, and many more. And this is where change is already being implemented and also visible for some people as well. And then maintenance. So after the program, our goal is that you leave the program not just with the knowledge that you gain here, but you have powerful tools and habits as well that will sustain long term for you and will stay with you for life. Okay. So intrinsic motivation. So intrinsic motivation is the most important, is the foundation of setting any goals or making sustainable change. Extrinsic motivation, like being rewarded for something or having pressure from someone else, can actually fade over time. But intrinsic motivations are deeply rooted in what truly matters to a person. So I encourage you to spend some time asking yourself those questions. On the next slide, I've got a few listed for you, so you can take a picture and think about what are your personal reasons. Obviously, some of you share your reason already, which are very powerful and personal. But this is something which will take you, which will allow you to implement those changes forever. So intrinsic motivation is something that we go back to when our motivation fails or when we feel like we don't have enough, willpower, because it's not about the willpower. Intrinsic motivation goes so much deeper. So I've got these questions for you, and feel free to take a picture of it if you wanted. We meant to be doing together, but it would probably take a bit too much time. But reflect on your brain health and your personal meaning behind why are you on this program. So ask yourself those questions. Why is your brain health important to you? And not just now, but in the long term. So ideally, if you have journaling is very powerful. Writing things down as well for you, so that you can actually go back to it and reflect to it when you maybe not feeling as motivated, let's say. So there are quite a few different ones. So that's going to be a homework. Every week we will try to also incorporate some homework. So you, in between the sessions, you also have things to think about and to plan ahead and to implement. So during the program, we will introduce some coaching tools which will help you to successfully implement your lifestyle changes. And today we're introducing one of the most powerful tools we can use when trying to create a new habit. Creating a habit which is clear and creating realistic goals. And that's the SMART goal framework, which helps us exactly with that. So SMART stands for specific. So specific. So we have to be very specific about what we want to achieve. And then measurable. So you want to make sure that you can measure your success. Achievable. So you want to ensure that your goal is realistic and achievable. Relevant specifically to your brain health. And also time framed as well. So you know exactly what is your deadline for that. And that will support your brain to actually successfully achieve your goals. So I've got two little ones suggested. You can see them on the box on the right-hand side. So by the end of this week, I will complete a daily 5-minute reflection to explore why I want to improve my brain health, identifying at least 3 personal reasons that feel meaningful to me. And again, you can write them down and reflect on them later on as well, or share them with the group too. And for the next 5 days, I will keep a simple daily food journal to observe what I eat, when I eat, and how it makes me feel without changing anything yet. So you can maybe come up with another little SMART goals. So you kind of get used to using those rules to set realistic goals and achievable ones that are obviously relevant to this program. Food journal, I think it would be a great idea because we're going to talk about nutrition quite a lot. So it'd be good for you to get in a mood of maybe noting what you're eating, how are you feeling, how it's affecting your your clarity, your focus, and things like that. And just a few other tips for successful habit formation as we go into this program. So tiny or atomic habits, they are very important because they make habit formation manageable, leading to consistent progress and also long-term success without overwhelming change. So I would say that's number one, very small steps to begin with. And then being consistent. So that helps to turn actions into habits, making progress sustainable and also results more achievable over time as well. So that's number 2. Celebrating your wins. It's so important to creating this positive reinforcement in your brain that will also really help you along the way. So celebration, obviously you wouldn't celebrate with a piece of cake, but there are so many other ways to acknowledge ourselves of, turning up and doing the work. So celebrating the wins, it's crucial for our brain wanting to do more of those difficult things. And then being patient as well. So habits, they take time to form. So tracking your progress to stay motivated, that's just another pillar to successfully forming your habits. So I'll probably finish here. So we still have 5 minutes if people wanted to interact or if you guys have any burning questions. And every week we will do something like that. So, at the end of 6 weeks, you have a big chunk of different coaching tools that you can implement and use for yourself. Okay, thank you.
Just a very quick one. I'm going to take a quick picture of the screen. If you don't want to be on it, please quickly just switch your camera off. It's just for our social media and kind of launching this. So if you're happy to have your picture on, leave it on. Otherwise, I'm going to take it in a minute or so and just switch your camera off. Great. So I'm sorry, I I overused my time, so Joe's presentation had to be cut a little
That's
short.
okay.
But the habit formation is important because, like Joe says, what we really want is we want you guys to be able to leave with small, sustainable changes that are, you know, going to be there for life. Right. Have we got any questions?
I'm just quickly going to say, you're going to take a photograph. What a good looking bunch we all are, aren't we?
Yes, we are.
Yeah. Any questions?
I'll just give a minor apology. So my daughter's got a rainbow group that's just started off like she's been on the waiting list for 3 years, and then it's come out exactly the same time as this course. So I'm going to try and make all the subsequent weeks, but it's just a bit of a juggle. So if I'm not here, I will definitely like watch the recordings. But I just wanted to say that I'm not going to drop off. But I was unlucky.
Absolutely. And yeah, so the recordings will be there. We will pop them through to you guys, so you will have access to recordings as well.
I know I've got some friends who would be very interested to listen to some of this. What would be your take on that? But I would quite understand if you're saying, you know, you spent a lot of time developing it.
Jean, I'll let you answer that one.
Thank you. I'm not very sure. Can we get back to you on that? So what are you asking that you can share
Well,
it
I
with?
don't know. I mean, I just know I've got certain, you know, because I'm late 60s, and I know I've got one particular friend, but there's a group of 4 or 5 of us, and I think we are at the age that it's getting closer. With most of us got the next generation up. But I don't want to share, I mean, I don't want to undercut your commercialness, but I can think at least of a couple of my friends who would really like to listen. But I think you should answer me separately, maybe.
Oh no, it's okay, Charmaine. What are you going to say?
What I was going to say, it's not so much around that, it's more around because the recordings will also have references to people in the group, and so that's my only concern around it is, you know, people's videos are on, you know, during the presentation I also made reference to some of the things people have said, and we want to keep the group quite a safe, nurturing space.
But
So
maybe I could screenshot the occasional thing that I thought would be particularly nice. One of
Absolutely.
for sure, there are some lovely studies and things in there, and things. Absolutely, please feel free to do that and share that. So there's
okay.
it's just the recording,
Absolutely.
I think, because we, you know, yeah, we have individual people on.
I'm sorry, I'm of the age that I don't know what the kind of protocol over.
That's fine.
I'm happy when my Zoom works for a whole thing without having to get anybody in to help me. So
Aren't we all?
yeah.
But Fiona, feel free to share the information, you know, because it's,
Yeah. No, I understand, but
yeah,
yeah.
you know, to share that with friends as well.
Lovely.
Absolutely.
Okay, thank you, Charmaine.
I mean, everyone's going to go away with information that they're going to talk about and share. That's absolutely, you know, it'd be crazy not to. But yes, there's just that thing about privacy and things. So fabulous. No more questions?
Yeah, can I just say, it's absolutely fascinating when you look at the number of tests that can be done that give people a heads up of where they're at in the baseline, and most people have no idea that you can actually go and get any of these tests done. I mean, I don't know because I never go to a GP. I don't know, can you go to a GP and say, look, there's nothing wrong with me. Can you check my blood pressure, cholesterol, any of these things? Because I don't know. And I'm at a situation where I have incredibly good health, but I don't take it for granted. I've never had tests done apart from when I did the Zoe study, and that was a gut microbiome thing. And I'm all about the gut, and that was all fine. I had a bit of information from that, but I do just think that it's quite incredible in this day and age, the amount of money that gets spent on drugs and treating things. Why are we not out with this? And I know you guys are doing an incredible thing, but it should be more mainstream. And from what Fiona was saying, I totally get it. not sharing the format that this is in, but my intention is to share the bits that you're sharing, because I'm already sharing a lot of that within my wellness hub. In my opinion, knowledge doesn't belong to anyone. Knowledge is to be shared. And the more of us that understand and know these things, the more people that know that you can reduce your risk, you can improve your health. Because as we know, our body can heal itself. It's a miracle, but most people haven't a clue. And that's the power of coming into groups with experts and with all you guys that have your own expertise, and, you know, taking that information, using it for ourselves. And I mean, with Jo giving us the information about changing habits, because with the best will in the world, a lot of the time people will take information, but they don't act on it. They don't do anything about it. And I say that all the time with ferments. You know, yeah, okay, I can open my fridge and look at them and they're really incredible, but they're not going to do you any benefit unless you actually eat them on a regular basis. But it's all of these things are incredibly important, you know. And but as I said, I do think it is quite sad because so many people haven't a clue. Who would you go to? And I know, Jean, that you run a lot of really impressive tests for like fatty liver and all of these things. Most people don't have any idea about them.
That's a
But
really
anyway, that was really interesting. Sorry, guys, but that was fantastic. Thanks so much. And I will be sharing bits and pieces of this within my group for sure.
great. There's a really good point, Janice, and also to the point to make is that we do quite extensive and sophisticated testing, but it's not available to everyone.
I know.
You know, and what we want to do is to say there are some things that you can like that your triglyceride to glucose ratio. You know, that's you can get that from your GP. Go and get your blood pressure. Go and get so there's lots of things. Your HbA1c. There's a lot of markers that your GP can do, and that you can ask for, that you can work with. So, you know, work with those. If you feel you're at higher risk and you have got the budget, you can go in and do a lot more of the other tests. We will actually be creating what's called a mini cognoscopy for this group as well, which is we've put together a little panel of testing which people can look at if they want to. But honestly, there's a lot of testing that your GP can do, that if you just look at those numbers and you can start making changes in those numbers, a massive impact.
Makes total sense. It really does. Thanks so much.
Very welcome.
Thank you so much for joining us, and we're really excited about having you guys along on this journey. We look forward to seeing you next week. We're going to be talking a little bit about blood glucose. Jo, you're doing something.
Nutrition.
And nutrition, that's right. Yeah, we're really excited about having you guys on here as well, and enjoy the rest of your evening.
Can I ask
Wait,
a quick
Talitha,
question before you sign off? You had a slide with a list of lots of studies. Is it possible to get that in a Word document so that I could look those studies up?
I will create a PDF. Is that okay?
Yeah, PDF is fine. Yeah, just something that I can
Of all the
copy and put into a search engine.
Yeah. So there's a PDF of all that. If you guys want more, because we didn't have a lot of time, so I rushed through a lot of it. If you want specific studies on specific areas like exercise or whatever, please reach out and we can get that to you.
Okay, thank you.
All right, listen,
Hope to see you all.
Thank you so much.
Bye.